All right. Hey guys, what's up? Woo! Yeah. So it's been a while and just thought, hey, you know what? Lately I've had a couple of cool ideas on my mind and thought, hey, I'm just going to go for another little short one here. Found some new links that I think are worthwhile. Adding a link, actually, I did an interview with Shadowland Voyagers. That was pretty cool. So with Sienna Lee, they have a cool show over there. So I'm posting a link to that. Some other cool stuff. And yeah, why don't I just get into one. So something interesting here. Just thinking about nobody feels like anything mystical is gonna happen anymore. The whole people are like, I'm sick of hearing about the Mayan calendar now. Even though it was like less than a year ago, and it's kind of this, the concept is still good. I'm a subscriber, you could say, to the cycles within cycles, the whole flow of how everything flows. Sort of like interlocking gears. Not that we necessarily see them, but sort of the progression of a person throughout their day. The way that the thoughts are, the way that our exterior surrounds us, kind of in this 360 degrees circle. Basically, like everybody, we're just a bunch of atoms, bigger atoms floating around. We're the nucleus, and we hold a different book, kind of like a different electron that's a part of us. Or we watch TV, which is that's a different kind of cycle, or a different kind of gear interlocking with your set of cycles. Um, the relationship waves of ups and downs are sort of these like domino effects, but they're less like dominoes, and they kind of are more like one cycle that triggers another, as one thing triggers something similar to it. And so anyway, the good old cycle within cycles thing. So I do think that there is still that in the grander scope as well. That whether we like it or not, there are going to be sort of changes. And this could be just sort of the changes we've seen before in sort of scientifically accepted history of the geological survey, comets coming and going, um, this kind of thing, mass extinction kind of thing. Or there could also be exotic kind of changes, and I don't think that's off the table. Um, if anything, it seems like nothing that bad actually happened, and maybe there was a whole ploy to sort of have a scapegoat of 2012, sort of like this false image a little too soon, so that everybody kind of gets their hopes down, where soon thereafter something could be more likely to happen. Um, and I don't think anything really is set in stone. But at the same time, you know, push comes to shove, and changes do happen, and it's you know what I'm saying, I guess. Anyway, so something mystical, I think, could definitely happen. Still, actually, it's only a matter of time. We're not gonna always be in this body in this lifetime. We're gonna go back into non-physicality, and see these other realities that I've I can say that I've seen these kinds of places, but that's for each individual to sort of see for themselves, or the validity of another's experience, is never total. But if you want my 2 cents, it's there, and it's like wild and cool and like and friendly, and this kind of leads into some of these next topics here. Even the sort of nasty experiences I had with these sort of real nasty feeling entities, that would fit this description of demons and reptilians. And one reptilian I saw actually showed me a vision of the inside of my lungs, and told me that what the damage that I'm doing to myself with smoking, and where it would lead me in like 7 years, and what it would look like. So he did have a kind of little predatory, like, here's you being stupid, like hurting yourself. It wasn't necessarily a friendly attitude, but at the end of it was kind of show me, in this very straightforward way, like, don't like fuck up your health. Don't be stupid. And that's a sort of Tibetan idea of the wrathful deities. They hold all these weapons in their hands, not to torture you, but to kind of cut off the scab of an old wound that you just won't let heal, and expose the wound so that you really have to deal with it. Or they hold a spear in their hand to see an obstacle up ahead of you, and to throw the spear ahead of time and take down that obstacle before it even becomes an issue. So it's like there's these different ways of interpreting, darkness, and in some flavors it is like a nutrient. It is it's something else to chew on, that gets points across to you that wouldn't necessarily communicate in the same way if everybody's being super nice about it all the time. Now, I also do think that this is a important distinction that's been just, it's difficult to really make these kinds of distinctions right off the bat about good versus evil, and it's just sort of is a puzzle. But what it comes down to these days is it feels like there is beneficial light, beneficial darkness, and non-beneficial light and non-beneficial darkness. So yeah, I do think there's spirit family, where we originally come from, where the original idea of existence was for everybody to have a good time and to not be bored for eternity, and just to kind of continuously grow, continuously explore, onward and forever it will grow, forever and ever and ever, this kind of thing. So that's there. Then there's also the sneaky, angels with guilt trips, passive aggression. These beings will seem to subscribe to religious institutions back on Earth, which are pretty obviously corrupted. So, why would you associate yourself with this sort of corrupted and controlling, manipulative institution that's caused like nothing but issues for humanity for extended periods of time? A being once offered me all this money if I would take them on as a spiritual advisor. I asked the being, why do you have anything to do with the horrible system of money on Earth? That's like kind of as bad as it gets. I'm not going to have anything to do with you or your advice. Get out of here. So that's the kind of like non-beneficial light. They're sort of like, something just feels kind of sneaky. Something's afoot. And then the beneficial darkness are like these beings that I've met that have been kind of like tough with me at first, but then like we're cool, because it's like, hey, I'm gonna respect you, please respect me, and they're like, hey, all right, whatever. It's cool. They may point out like, hey, you might want to, check yourself on this, and they might not be so nice about it, but ultimately, they're pointing something out for my benefit. So at the end of it, it doesn't actually feel like this is my torturing, adversary. It feels like, oh, this is somebody who just has a different style, but is still, on this path of growth or not, or whatever. And then the non-beneficial darkness are truly tricksters. There's like kind of no good result of what they're doing. It's just sort of a parasitic type of thing where it's all about kind of the bottom line of energy consumption. That can take all sorts of various forms, also as sort of non-beneficial lights. So yeah, that's very clear. We've talked a lot about, archons as kind of these sort of systems that sort of lack the capacity for empathy, because it has nothing to do with their existence. But that's why we're here, because slowly but surely, I think every particle of consciousness will sort of can only be limited for so long. So I think it can only grow, and it's like the parasitic chapter is impermanent, and probably still has a long way to go, of course, to exhaust all the different options, but it's not something that can necessarily last forever. Which is why I think there's these kind of ladders of conscious embodiments, so you can sort of work your way through from, like, say you were a really mean bat, and then you were like a really mean, rugged tree in a forest, and then you were a really rugged, angry kind of person, but then you fell in love as a person, and suddenly that ruggedness, it's just sort of not really a part of you anymore. I think these kinds of experiences and these processes happen to just all the different forms of consciousness. And that's actually, there is this path to, like, there's never no way out. There's never eternal hell. And it's because of existences like these, with a foot in hell and a hand in heaven, so to speak, that make that possible. So kudos to the universe for that. So anyway, the other thing about darkness I really wanted to mention, these non-beneficial forces need you to hate them. They need you to not want to try and help them. They need you to stick on this kind of a emotional bandwidth, which isn't necessarily good. It's like, oh, I'm afraid of this. I'm ready to be scared by it. I want to run away from this. I want to, like, all my thoughts about it are the hatred of the dominion it holds me in, and the kind of horror of its whole past, and all of the pain it's inflicted on others. These are exactly the kinds of feelings these forces want you to always be putting out. I think once we can kind of look at darkness and really see that it's putting up this front so that it can just keep doing what it's doing and never reach a resolution. Because resolution seems to actually be naturally worked in to nature's model. But if you can sort of put up the perfect front of the perfect resistance, it's going to avoid resolution for as long as possible, and become this nasty, don't ever get close to me, always run in fear from me, and never, open a loving heart, and this kind of thing. But it's a very delicate balance, because then at the same time you can't just completely open your heart to some of these beings, because then what they will just take complete advantage of you. So it is the sort of like battleground of the universe, like where we are at right now with it. Even in the bigger scope of things, I think that is still sort of like where things are at in the bigger picture. And we're sort of a part of an effort to sort of find this perfect middle ground, where each individuals that embody can decide for themselves, because it can't be done third party. I think this is part of like what the universe is sort of trying to figure out. So there's that. Something else I wanted to talk about is kind of just a little more about this idea of harvesting emotional energy. This gets talked about all the time, and it sort of is never conclusive. It sort of is just like, yeah, all the fear we pump out keeps us down, man. And that's completely true to an extent, but it's sort of like recognizing, why would these forces, these from these other dimensions, why would these forces go through all this trouble to get a hookup of humanity's emotional energies of fear, intense praise, worship, violence, stadiums of roaring people who are divided into two sides, or battlegrounds of two sides who are killing each other. These are the kind of hookups, these not so savory entities. This is the kind of energies that they want. And I just was thinking about it the other day, just sort of in the context of electricity. We rely on electricity. We need it, just to live the way that we live. And if we didn't have it, well, we'd have to really figure some stuff out. So it's really important that we keep our electricity. Now, imagine that we're far in the future, and all of a sudden our electricity, it's no longer just electricity, but now our electricity is intelligent. So you have this form of electricity for this, and this specialized form of electricity for that, and you would never go back to the way old electricity was, because these new specialized forms of electricity can do things that old electricity never could. So now when I look at our emotional energies are being harvested, that kind of an energy source is filled with charges of consciousness. So for a particular need, an energy source that is riddled with the vibration of fear is going to be an ideal power source, in a sense where any other power source would not be as good. This goes for the same as the power source of worship. It's got this sort of like inherent consent, like take it and do what you will with it, and I'm like pouring it out. That seems like, oh, this is like, now I have all of this excess consciousness of this type, which I can now intelligently apply in a way that just takes the most advantage of the power source. So what I'm seeing here is, this really makes me recognize, like, the power source of electricity, nah, that's nothing to these kinds of, higher species. So many of these terms I'm using are like in air quotes. as well. Higher and darkness and evil, and you know what I mean. Anyway, so these higher civilizations, they don't need regular electricity. They kind of need gold, but just sort of like to sort of build the stuff. What they really need is exotic forms of energy, exotic forms of consciousness, to be constantly keeping all of this stuff running at the highest value. Sort of like they're drug junkies, and they're like getting such a high from this many barrels rolling in the front door every day. There's They're going to do everything they can to keep that amount of energy input consistent, to maintain that high. So it's like the gold isn't as important. Regular electricity is sort of useless. Genetics is a more interesting machine, a more interesting mechanism. But still, what do you really need? What you really need is the consciousness. You need the life flowing through the thing. If you don't have the life that's flowing through the genetics is like an empty egg, and I'm sure reality has it where it's like the genetics form around the consciousness when the energies are right. It probably just bubbles up and there it is. Or I'm just saying these things are probably all interconnected. But the point I really wanted to just throw out there is that it seems the consciousness itself is more valuable than any form of mechanism. So that was just a worthwhile point. Another thought kind of along these same lines of emotional energy consumption is that I've been sort of rethinking the Anunnaki myth, and just these different creation myths in general, from cross-cultural. And there's these different themes, right? Particularly in the Anunnaki sort of Genesis story, is here mankind is either built from the ground up by the gods themselves, or man is endowed with genetic manipulation from this third party, the Anunnaki, and can now be an ideal servant to God, a slave to mine gold for them. And they wouldn't be what they would be if it was not for this genetic manipulation. Or how lucky for you that we had built you from the ground up, and then, and then we built a woman from the rib of the first slave. And you should feel ashamed for your natural tendencies of sexual desire, and you should only obey us, whatever we tell you. And remember, your only purpose for existence was for our convenience. And it's just like, how convenient is that? Of a propaganda to influence a race of beings. So that has a strong feeling of a lack of sincerity. And then we look at kind of these other creation myths, and we see these different themes. So another theme is that the sky gods arrive and they impart the knowledge, or they mix with the people. Now, if the sky gods are arriving, that's showing us that the people were here already in the first place. So, were there humans here already, and then, other similar type of conscious entities from the nearby neighborhood arrived? Um, I get a feeling that probably these neighboring entities, which would have no problem interfering with the evolution of another species, mind you, no problem at all, are probably doing it for some form of self-benefit. And it's not just for the mining of gold back in thousands of years ago. No, I think that these races and species would mix their genetics for reasons to their advantage. That they wouldn't bother with the trouble of mixing their genetics with another set of genetics unless they could get something out of it. So the way I kind of can see this picture is here are these naturally evolving humanoids on the surface, and wow, they got a great program going on for them. They are so fresh, just like reliving those first few steps into conscious evolution. They're really starting from the ground up, with all these different sets of species of different eras. Um, it's an 18 billion year old universe, and to take billions of years worth of evolution and then to start it again, and have it all working towards creating the most enriching environment to then have this hominid evolve amongst all of the multitude of biological influences. That's a more enriching evolutionary experience than usual. So it probably had to be known in the universe, which neighboring species would have no problem kind of, you know, coming into the nursery here and taking advantage of the great thing going here for this race of hominids and consciousness that's growing. And not only that, this set of consciousness here seems to be on its own path altogether. Its destiny is not to belong to really any of these local empires. Its destiny seems to be to sort of take all of the greatest influences to learn from this area, and then to go on its way to higher dimensions of existence. Its destiny is not to stick around. Our destiny, I think, was to kind of get a good look of what this has to offer, and then to integrate that knowledge and actually progress, transcend, you know to take it even a step further. And that's sort of the destiny. And I think that really upset some of the local neighbors here, because their destiny is that they're where they're going to be. They're kind of topped out. So, and they probably had, through the free will of their own choices, sort of put themselves in those kinds of positions. And how appetizing for this completely fresh, completely organic, sort of effortlessly evolving into this incredible new type of genetic being, this new type of spiritual consciousness, that's like only in the beginning stages of their journey to like this complete universal consciousness. Of course they're going to show up, have some propaganda ready, take advantage, while they still can, and to genetically manipulate. I think part of the goal here is so that when humans do sort of radiate out into the universe, sort of like a big seed pod, as though the Earth is a big seed pod, and at a certain point, when the season is right, the consciousness will release from the seed pod into the bigger forest. And I think that idea was that we sort of bring this like heightened perspective to places and realities of which we've been before. And we sort of spread higher consciousness throughout, you get what I'm getting at here. And wouldn't it be convenient for some of these other races to sort of install their genetic programming into our genetics so that when we go on our natural evolutionary path, we end up spreading their genetics, their ideals, through the free will choice of our own beliefs, which had been meticulously crafted here while in a state where we could be taken advantage of. So that as we progress, we end up sort of spreading the empire, so to speak, just through our way of being itself, through the beliefs that we had built up, through those deep relationships that we made with these various unsavory influences. Yes, I think it would actually have an impact in the next stages of existence. If people have such a full affinity for a certain deity and we're praying to them every day for the most of their life, that's going to have a lasting influence on the way they're going to progress. Who are they going to gravitate towards naturally when they're now not in a body anymore and they're back in the realm of non-physicality? So this is the sort of crossroads that reveals itself when you're sort of reconsidering these myths, because you can start to take apart like the situation just from the basis of who came first, where did they come from, what did they do, what did they say, what was their overall motive. And that's why the whole thing of, you're a slave to go mine gold for me because my spaceship runs on gold or something, that seems like what convenient leverage, especially if you have secret societies full of people calling the Anunnaki gods. Those are the kinds of people that you really want to convince that you're almighty powerful. And essentially what the whole game is a game of usurping. To take the good things that we have going for us and to steer it to them. And I think that's just part of what goes on here, and that's just part of the deal. Just sort of at a very end note here is what I feel like in my heart as a life purpose, I guess, in one way, is just to kind of create spaces that have this kind of awareness. This YouTube and these talks and the groups of people who are the really insightful, caring people, thoughtful people who are listening to things like this. It's like this is a space where we can actually talk about this stuff and not ridicule one another and just sort of be vulnerable in a way. Even just having a conversation with a friend that is opening their consciousness in a way that they never considered before. There's these little things that we can do throughout the day for ourselves and others. And thinking about like, what are these bigger things that I could do? And just the process of thinking about it, and while trying to do something and trying to do a little here and there, that really is doing it. That's kind of it, I feel like we can really get to a place with this stuff where we're good. I feel good about my level of awareness, the way I look at the world, the way I feel about my spirit, the way I feel about the bigger picture. And just establishing it as like a space and as a conversation is sort of making that happen. That's kind of pretty much all I wanted to just share with you guys, and just wanted to just say keep up the good work, everybody. And I'll still do these from every now and then. when I just feel super like I gotta just get a couple things out there. And yeah, and enjoy the new links down there. And until next time, just keep up the good work, everybody. Bye bye.